Hi, this is Dr. Erica Lewis, and this lecture is on writing a manuscript and how you can understand the difference between the manuscript and writing your scholarly document. You'll be doing both of these tasks likely this semester, unless you're taking these courses in a different order than the plan of study. So it's important to understand how to do each of these. You will have some readings in your text about this also in chapters 5 and 8, but I wanted you to have the most kind of fundamental information as you get started. So first, let's talk about characteristics of a DNP scholarly document. DNP scholarly documents are relatively long, roughly 5 to 100 pages, and they explain every detail of the work. This is your first doctoral level work, and you need to show every detail to demonstrate that you've mastered the competency at the doctoral level. And in the future, that changes because you've done that, shown that competency. So let's talk about the focus of the DNP scholarly document. The DNP scholarly document shows the details of your workflow, your process. It often gives rationales explaining why you did what you did. And again, that's to help someone to see your entire process, to validate that you have competency to work at this level. It's often background heavy with a long and detailed literature review, including some literature that may be more dated than we might include in a manuscript. And so there's a lot of information in the background saying, the literature that you built from, and also, the rationale for why you did your scholarly work the way you did. The results are given in detail, and oftentimes you use many charts and graphs, and there's lengthy discussions after each of these explaining what you found. And then there's a relatively brief discussion section in the DNP scholarly document. This is kind of the opposite of what you do in a manuscript, and we'll talk about that moving forward. So let's talk about the format. The format of the DNP scholarly document is determined by the university. The graduate school is in charge of a lot of the structural formatting components. How wide are your margins? What does your index look like? And these things you'll learn about in the 801 course, the format determined by the graduate school. And then there's the format of the actual content. So beginning with your introduction or background, that's where the School of Nursing determines what content you have in that section. And we follow the APA 7th edition writing style for the formatting of that. And then also there's an extensive reference list that's included as part of your DNP scholarly document. Authorship of the DNP scholarly document, the student generates all of the content because this is your demonstration of competency. However, the faculty and DNP team coach the student about all aspects of the content. So the design of the project, the rationales for why what's done, guiding the analysis and the findings, and the write-up of it all. Should be a collaborative work, although it's a different type of collaboration. In this case, the faculty and the team are usually giving feedback, suggesting changes to content that the student generated. All right, let's switch gears and talk about characteristics of a manuscript. This is the focus of this course. In this class, you are writing a manuscript. So hopefully by seeing these differences, you'll understand what you need to do differently in this class as compared to your writing of your scholarly document. You're writing about the same topic, but it's a very different way of writing and product from writing. So the length is determined by the journal. It's often around 20 to 25 pages. So right there you can see it's much shorter than many DNP scholarly documents. A half to a fourth of the content. And also, just to kind of clarify the terminology, we call this a manuscript when it's in draft and an article once it's been accepted for publication. So the manuscript is often 20 to 25 pages. Again, the journal determines that, and you realize kind of going in here that you're going to have much less content in your manuscript. So a lot of what you'll be doing as you revise from your scholarly document content to your manuscript content is cutting down on the amount of information in each section. So let's talk about the focus. You want to shorten the background section of the scholarly document for your manuscript, and make sure that you introduce the purpose early on in the manuscript. But a lot of your rationale ends up being removed, and some of the literature review ends up being removed. You only want to present the most important and up-to-date information in your manuscript, which means taking out some of those details that were included in your scholarly document. Once you've achieved that competency, you've done your scholarly document, as you submit a manuscript, folks know that you've demonstrated that competency, and there's a lot less information that you provide for them. So you shorten the literature review, presenting only the most important information. I've seen many journals moving towards only allowing literature from the last 5 to 7 years. Sometimes that goes to 10 years, but your literature review information becomes more concise and making sure it's up to date. The methods are often shortened, perhaps eliminating some or all of the rationale for your methods. The way you determine how much of that to remove is to read some articles from your target journal and see how much they include, and then mimic that. You want to shorten the reference section to the most recent evidence, again, including evidence from the last 5 to 10 years, depending on your journal's criteria. Now, you don't want to take the reference out if you're still relying on information from that author. That would be unethical. So you want to remove the content, make sure it's up to date, and then not use that reference. So it's almost like when you're writing your scholarly document, you're showing all of the foundation of what you did. It's like a building inspector coming in and looking at a house. They have to see every little detail. When you're writing a manuscript, it's like the finished product of the house and having guests over. Other than knowing that foundation is strong, they don't want to see every little detail of your crawl space. So you're having less information about that background, the rationale for your manuscript than you do for your scholarly document. And that's because there's two different audiences and two different purposes of these two documents. When it comes to the format is determined by the journal. So you want to read your journal guidelines very carefully. Most journals follow a IMRAD format, so introduction, methods, results, discussion. And there are some slight variations, like some journals section out a background section in addition to an introduction. And then some separate out a conclusions in addition to a discussion. Others combine those together, like put the conclusion in discussion and put the background in the introduction section. So that is going to be determined by your journal. And we will use this IMRAD format to kind of frame how we talk about the sections in this course, although you'll write your actual sections according to the journal you're targeting's recommendations. So we're going to get into these sections and what goes in them in greater detail in a later lecture, but I do want to explain that for those of you doing policy analysis and program evaluation formats, and if you aren't doing that this time but do a policy analysis or program evaluation in the future, those require a more significant formatting rewrite than a QI or evidence-based practice study in most cases. And again, we're going to talk about this in detail later, but just know that it would be a good idea, if you haven't already, begin reading examples of policy analysis and program evaluations that have been published in the literature so that you can understand the conversion process. What that looks like in the scholarly document is very different than how it looks in a manuscript. For policy analysis and program evaluation, you follow the steps of what you did in your scholarly document. In a manuscript, you write about it much more fluidly. And there's a good explanation of this for policy analysis in the Bar Docs text, when you tell the story of a policy analysis, and the same is true of a program evaluation, but I don't know of a text that explains it quite as clearly. You don't tell the story in those like rote kind of steps that you did them when you were going through the process. So if you have the Bardock's text and you did a policy analysis, I would recommend reading that final chapter of the most recent version of the Bardock's text to help with this. And then just to mention that some journals do have specific QI project formats. So you're kind of lucky if you have a QI project and that journal has a format that matches that. So you may want to target a journal that has that. But if not, that's a relatively simple conversion to the IMRAND or IMRAND-like format that most journals use. All right, let's talk about authorship yet. For a manuscript, those are often co-authored. So you and the faculty may both be writing content for that. Now, you're writing a draft manuscript in this course and you're getting course credit for it. So your faculty is not going to be helping you with writing this. But when you graduate, you and the faculty may choose to work together and co-author a manuscript in which they may do some heavy lifting of the content. So that's something you want to negotiate, and I give you some prompts in this class for how to negotiate that with your faculty member, your DNP team and your chair. So JMU faculty who are part of your team, they meet criteria for authorship. We're going to look at criteria for authorship in this course. They meet those criteria for authorship. If they don't, you have you're in a difficult situation, and you should speak with our JMU DNP coordinator about that situation you're in to get some advice. But your JMU faculty team, your chair, should meet criteria for authorship, and per policy at JMU, they must be included as authors on any disseminations of your JMU DNP Scholarly project. So you want to include them in those conversations moving forward once you graduate about how you're going to disseminate this work. I will say you plan to take some time with that. I am submitting right now, as we head into the fall, an article with a student who graduated last December, and that is the quickest turnaround I've ever had. Usually this takes a good year to get that article submitted, and sometimes you get it submitted one place and end up needing to submit it again someplace else. So plan on taking some time after and talk with your team to make sure that they're on board with that and everybody's on the same page as to what type of dissemination you'll do. And again, I have some prompts and support for you as you do that in this course, so you don't need to jump ahead and do that yet. I'll get you some help and coaching for that. All right, this lecture explained the difference between the characteristics of a manuscript, which you're writing your manuscript in this class, and the characteristics of a scholarly document, which you're writing in a different class. And I hope it's helpful for you. Please don't hesitate to ask any questions.